Hey guys, how you doing today? We're going to show you how to install our TSS relocation bracket for the 5th gen 4runner. So this is going to be for any 4runner equipped with Toyota Safety Sense that has a sensor in the very front of the grille. This bracket is going to relocate it into a different position so that you can run full-size bumpers if those bumpers are not compatible with the sensor. This will move it to a new location so it can be used. So we're going to show you real quick just what comes with the kit. First of all, the bracket, of course, and then we have just some basic hardware. 2 5/16 by 1 bolts with 4 5/16 flat washers, 2 5/16 locking nuts, and 2 1/4 by 1 bolts with locking nuts and 4 1/4 inch flat washers. So the installation for this relocation bracket is fairly easy. It takes basic tools and pretty basic mechanical skills to get those one put in. So it's a pretty simple process, and the first thing we're going to start with is removing this plastic cover from the radiator and grill area. So there's a bunch of these little clips around the whole perimeter of this plastic. You need to remove those. And to do that, you want to push down on the center of that tab and then lift the clip right up out of the hole. So you'll need to go ahead and remove all of those all the way around the perimeter and across the top of the radiator here. Remove all those clips, and then you can pull that plastic cover and set it to the side. All right, so we have our plastic cover removed here. You just set it back on top of the engine, and we're going to be working in this area right here down behind the grill, and that's going to be where your TSS sensor is located, right down there on the back side of the grill. So the next thing we need to do is we need to remove this wiring harness clip from this metal bracket here. There's just a plastic little tab on each side of that. It has to be squeezed together to get in there and unclip that from the hole. So you can pull that out and let it hang, and then we need to disconnect this plug from the actual sensor back here behind the grill. So you squeeze it over here on the other side to disconnect and pull that connector off, and that can just hang for now. All right, so now we're going to remove our sensor. This is the sensor right here. This whole piece needs to come out from the back of the grill. There's going to be 3 pieces of hardware that hold that. There's this black screw right here, which is 10mm socket or wrench. There's another one of those screws on the other side of the sensor here. And then this small silver screw at the very top. Just use a Phillips screwdriver to remove that one, and then your entire sensor can come out from the back of the grill. All 3 of our screws have been removed. Now our sensor is ready to come right out. You can remove that from the back of the vehicle and set it on the workbench. So we have our sensor on the bench here. This is the front of the sensor, faces towards the front of the vehicle there. We're going to show you how to align it into our relocation bracket. So this bracket here, this is going to be the top of the bracket, and the way that this leg jogs forward, that is the front facing portion of the bracket. So we want to take our sensor and align it with the front of the sensor going on the front of this bracket, just like this. So we're going to put that in like that, and then you're going to take your 1/4 inch bolts with flat washer, put them in from the front of the bracket with another flat washer and the lock nut on the back. All right, so we have our hardware holding our sensor into the bracket. Now you can see that these holes are slotted and adjustable. That's just to give some adjustment for the sensor to get it aligned properly once it's on the vehicle. However, to begin with, we suggest sliding the sensor pretty much all the way to the top of those slotted holes so that this upper tab is just about touching this top portion of the bracket. Get the sensor nice and horizontal, kind of parallel with the top of the bracket. And so adjust it just about like that, and then you can go ahead and tighten down your 1/4 inch hardware. So before we go ahead and get ready to mount this sensor in the vehicle, there's one little plastic tab on the back side of the grill here that needs to be cut out just to get it out of the way and out of the view of the sensor. So we're going to show you where that's at next. So there's a little plastic tab that we need to cut off behind this plastic area where the sensor is going to mount behind here. The tab kind of lines up right about in line with this little seam here, and it just pokes up behind here, and it's going to block the view of the sensor. So we need to trim that out. So it's going to be inside here, going to show you right down in this area below this steel cross member. It's down below that, and once I stick the camera down in here, you'll be able to see where that little piece is sticking up. So below the steel cross member, and that's it right there. So this little piece right here with that round deal on it, you're just going to want to cut right across the bottom here. Just snip it off with some tin snips or whatever you can get in there to snip that and remove that entire piece right there. So in order to get our bracket mounted into the vehicle right here, there's two more little plastic clips we need to remove on the back side of the grill. I'm going to show you those real quick. So there's two here. We're going to need to remove both of these. We'll take those out, and that's where our bracket is actually going to bolt in place. So I'm just taking a flat blade screwdriver, getting underneath the top of that clip, pop that up, and you can remove both of those clips. Those will no longer be needed. So we have our bracket and sensor assembly all ready to go, ready to mount it back here. So you're going to want to take your 5/16 by 1 bolts with a flat washer on top. You can drop those right through the top of your bracket here so they're ready. And then you're going to set your whole assembly down in place here, and you're going to line up these 5/16 bolts and put them through the holes where we just removed those plastic clips earlier. So those will go right in place there, and then you'll want to put flat washer and your lock nut on the bottom side of each one of these bolts. Now this one you can reach with 2 wrenches. However, this one is pretty difficult. You have to reach all the way up from the bottom of the sensor and get up in there from all the way down here below the sensor. So it's very hard to get a wrench in there. What I recommend for that one is to go ahead and use a small ratchet with a long extension and a socket to reach up behind that sensor, and then you can get up back there and be able to tighten down your bolts. So we've got our bracket and our sensor in place. Our 5/16 bolts are almost tight, but just enough, they have just enough movement so we can adjust that bracket a little bit, and we're going to show you how you want to properly adjust it. So these sensors, since we're now moving it off to the side of the grill rather than directly in the center, we want to make sure we adjust that bracket just a little bit offset so the sensor is pointing towards the center of the vehicle and not away or off to the side, because that could cause a bit of a faulty reading and cause it to not function quite as accurately as normal. So I'm going to show you guys that adjustment real quick. So when we put this bracket in, put our bolts in, they're almost tight. I like to shove the bracket all the way to the front of the vehicle, and then I'll pivot out this end towards the back just a little bit. So we can move that just a hair, maybe even about a half length of that slotted hole. And that's going to take this sensor and it's going to angle it just a little bit so it's pointing towards the center of the vehicle. Now that adjustment right there, that can be, what that will change is if you're like on a windy road and your vehicle is not seeing the car in front of you all the time and it's trying to speed up, it could be because this sensor is not angled properly and it's pointing off to the side of the vehicle. So you want to adjust that so it's pointing towards the center as accurately as possible. The other thing to watch for is vertical adjustment. We set that earlier. Typically this position works well, but if this sensor for some reason ends up high enough that it is seeing a little bit of this metal bracket, it will cause a malfunction for the sensor, and you'll need to slide it down just a little bit so that it cannot see that steel bracket. So everything should be in position how we want it. Now you can go ahead and tighten these bolts all the way. Do not over tighten them because we have the plastic of the grill pinched in between that bracket. So just tighten them down enough so that the bolts are snug and this bracket doesn't move around. So all of our hardware is tight, our bracket's set in place. We just need to reconnect our wiring harness here. So you can clip this portion back into the metal bracket there, and then just twist your cable around, plug it into the back of the sensor. And then next thing you can do or the only thing left to do really is to just reinstall your plastic cover. Just go through and put all your clips in place and pop the top down so they're flush, so your cover's back in place. And that's all you need to do to finish up the installation for the bracket. Now that your sensor relocation process is complete, I just wanted to go over a couple more details with the sensor, how it functions, just to make sure that you guys understand well how it works and its adjustment if you need to, or if you encounter any issues down the road. So essentially why we've made this bracket is to move it over and offset it and to move it up. So originally the sensor is a lot lower. Aftermarket bumpers like ours, the steel comes up pretty high and it will block that sensor. So the sensor gets moved into this area to not be blocked by steel or anything else. However, there are still things that can affect that sensor when it's moved into this position. One of those being aftermarket grills. So this one is like a TRD Pro replica style grill. We've tried it with this one and it does work well. However, they're all a little bit different. So this plastic, these letters and stuff get pretty thick. Once that plastic gets thick enough, it could potentially block the sensor. So it works well with this one, but if you have a different type of grill, that plastic may be thicker or these letters might be farther out and it could cause a problem with the sensor. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing, if you do have an aftermarket bumper on here and you've relocated your sensor, you want to make sure that if you're adding additional lights or bull bars or anything like that, any of those items that end up in front of that sensor where it's been relocated to will block the sensor and cause a malfunction. So please keep all of that stuff in mind when you're putting your bumper on, adding your accessories. As long as you don't have anything in front of that area that's not blocking it, your sensor should work very well. Just a couple things to remember for adjustment is that you want that sensor pointing towards the center of the vehicle as well as possible, because on windy roads and things like that, it may come out of focus of the vehicle in front of you if the sensor is pointing off to the side in one direction. As long as your sensor is centered well and you're not blocked by any steel or any lights or anything like that, everything should work very well for you. And with that, your installation process is all complete.